Welcome, I'm Tony with Black Cactus Woodwork, and today we're going to work on a kitchen cabinet project. Now, I am behind on the project, so we're just going to jump right into it. Now, I'm not a cabinet maker, but I did make a box. It's sitting too close to the ground, so I'm going to go ahead and make a toe kick and raise that up. Now, this is a 24-inch cabinet. I know that because, well, I built it. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and rip down some 3.5-inch strips from this lovely Birch plywood? Oh, it's birch plywood? Yeah, we're using plywood. So, once that has been ripped down, I know that I need two 24-inch length pieces of wood, and then I'm gonna use a stop block and set up for 19 inches, and I'm gonna cut 3 at 19 inches, and that's just where it's gonna land. I don't know, I'm not a magician or a person that does math or whatever, so I don't know, I just went with 19 inches. And now we are sanding them so I don't get splinters. Oh, little tip here, use some oil for your pneumatic tools. This is just Harbor Freight stuff. I don't know if it's any good, but it was cheap and I use it, and yeah. So I like to test fit everything, make sure everything kind of lines up before I go ahead and do a hard commit, because hard committing these days is quite terrifying. And yeah, so okay, let's just speed on through this. No, but really, I like to use these 90-degree corner clamps, mainly because it keeps things straight and at 90 degrees, which in cabinet making, believe it or not, is actually kind of important. Yeah. So I'm just using these corner clamps to basically give me a stop block, so it's easier for me to glue and line everything up. I'm not actually clamping both sides and making sure everything is square, perfectly square. I don't know, maybe I should, but I don't know, this seems to work pretty good for me. And I just did a little middle support there because the bottom base of this cabinet is going to be pretty heavy. Then we just do some cross measurements just to make sure that we are in fact square. And that right there is a look of confusion, because I'm guessing that the measurements did not come out the same. So from corner to corner and corner to corner, those measurements should come out the same if it's square. Yes, we're still looking at you, dude. So I've taken my trusty square in with strange, and why I'm so confused is it is actually, according to the square, it's coming out square. So we do another measurement. Turns out we actually are. I measured it wrong the first time. It's important to clean your work surface before you set down the toe. That way you can level it out properly. My floor is not perfectly level, and then you set your box on top and it should be flat and level. Now we can start on making the face frame for the cabinet. Oh yeah, with the horizontal sticky thing. Here we see a confused man in a new element, trying to decipher what the hell to do. We measure our box to be 31 inches tall. Oh my god, he's struggling. Wow, damn, this board takes up literally my entire shop. So before I can even get it to the miter saw, I need to pre-cut for the cut. So I'm gonna use the trusty DeWalt. Then, can you guys guess where we go next? You're wrong. I'm gonna take it to the planer first. Well, actually, I did take it over to the joiner first, but that recording file was corrupted, likely due to overheating. But I did initially take it to the joiner to flatten one side, joint one edge, and then I brought it over here to the planer. Once that was done, I set up my table saw, basically just using a scrap piece that I used to figure out the width and thickness that I actually wanted for the face frame, and then just go ahead and start ripping the pieces down. There's really not much more to it at this point. But I would like to reiterate that I am not a cabinet maker, so this is not a how-to or educational video, to be completely honest with you. It's more of a entertainment video, or at least a way that you could build them if you wanted to, I guess. And the reason why I say that is because after looking at the plans for the kitchen that I am building cabinets for, I realized I cut too many pieces. And I realized that I actually needed to leave one piece much wider, because this cabinet actually goes up against a blind corner cabinet. So that means, what the hell is this guy doing? Ah, yeah, okay, dust in the tracks. I got it. Now the actual width doesn't really matter. I just need it to be wide enough so that during install, I can trim it back to give the proper spacing between the cabinets. What the hell is this goofball doing? Oh yeah, that is a pretty cool case, but what's really cool actually is what's inside. So these are spacer blocks, and I'm gonna use an 1/8 inch spacer block. Now, yes, I could just measure from the bottom of the cabinet to the bottom of the upper wood piece thing, but again, I am not a magician. So this is how I'm gonna measure the length I need for the vertical pieces. Now this is the Nitra. I have no idea, but they're pretty cool. If you want some, I'll leave description in below if they're still available. So now that we have the measurements for the vertical pieces of, like, I don't know why I keep saying my face frame, I'm gonna go ahead and use the miter saw to cut these down. But I actually have a tip for you, believe it or not. You see how I didn't quite nail it on that cut? It's not really focusing in that great, but you can see I'm a little bit past the line of where I want to be. A little trick. If you pull your saw down and push the wood, don't push it hard, just until it barely touches, and look at that, boom. It gives you just the perfect little hair follicle. And now we are pretty much right where we need to be. Now this needs to be 29 1/8 inch. And with that little trick, I'll betcha, well, son of a bitch, it is 29 1/8, almost to the 64th. So there's a little tip for you. Now that everything is cut and laid out, I am marking some lines for the pocket hole jig. Yes, I am using pocket screws and glue to assemble this. Now I'm doing the lines because my pocket hole jig is just a cheap Amazon one, and it just helps me line up my holes for where I need to drill. Make sure you set the pocket hole depth properly to whatever you are screwing into. So the thickness of the wood you are screwing into. Make sure you set your jig up for that and not what you are drilling into. And also don't forget to set up your stop collar. I'm using the 90-degree clamps to make sure that the frame is square, and I'm also using some Craig face clamps to hold the pieces in place as I screw. It is much harder to use pocket screws without the clamps, at least in my experience. I also don't use the impact to send the screws in. I use it on low power just to get it started, and then I finish tightening with my hand driver so I can feel the wood come together and stop, and I don't end up stripping or breaking the wood. The last tip is, since we are assembling this together upside down, make sure it is in the right orientation, because once you glue it and then you flip it up and put it up against your cabinet, you may have actually done your holes and your clamping and your gluing and screwing all wrong, and then you gotta remake it. Ask me how I know. It is finally time to measure for the horizontal sticky thing. Now, I do have a question for you guys though. What is brown and sticky? If you know the answer to that question, leave a comment. Since I know that my face frame is square, I am just going to use 2 5-inch spacers, basically just wood spacers. You're gonna put one in each corner, and then that way when you grab your horizontal sticky thing, you can slide it in and push it up against those 2 spacers, and I mean, theoretically it should be exactly spaced properly and square. And if that's the case, then you'll be like this guy. Yeah. And now we can remove our horizontal piece and drill 2 more pocket holes. And this Milwaukee is really struggling, so we're going to switch to a real man's drill and finish the job with rigid. And here is a perfect example of making sure that your orientation is correct. Now, if installed it in that first orientation that I had, we would have been screwed because it essentially would have been upside down. We need the wider part to be on the left side of the cabinet as you're looking at it. And if I would have put it together the first way I had it, then our horizontal piece would be literally at the bottom of the cabinet, or it would be at the top of the cabinet, but the wider piece would be on the right side of the cabinet. So orientation is extremely important. Make sure you don't have to redo stuff. Once you have completed a portion of your project, it's okay to marvel in your success and take a little break and just, dude. Gross. That's much better. And with our success and near mistakes, I think that's a good place to call it a day. I start off day 2 with my absolute favorite thing, sanding. I'm just kidding. But first, I need to protect my masculine millennial mittens because I'm actually allergic to sawdust, believe it or not. Now, these cabinets are actually going to be painted, so I'm only sanding them with up to 180 grit sandpaper. And oh man, I feel your pain, dude. I'm sorry. With the sanding finally done, I can test fit the face frame. This is a pretty exciting part, man. Got to see it finally starting to kind of come together a little bit, you know what I mean? So I'm just going to use these 6-inch clamps to temporarily hold the face frame in place, and all I want to do really is just check my fitment and make sure things are looking pretty square and good to go, you know what I mean? And then of course, you know, gotta again admire your work. It looks pretty good at this point, man. I'm not mad about it. But now I gotta think about how I'm going to permanently attach the face frame. I've got 2 options. I can try to run glue along a vertical edge and get it all around, and then take the nail gun and just but then it can be wobbly and just off kiltered and not look so good. Or I can take the frame off, take the box off. Oh my god, you dumbass, man. I'm always doing stuff like that. I can either put the box down on its back, I can take the face frame and lay it on top, and then I can nail it in. I'm not exactly sure which one is better. I could go with option 1, but I'm gonna go with option 2. Yeah. First, we're gonna do a little bit of shop cleaning once again. That way the box can lay flat on the floor, because if it's not flat on the floor, then it's not flat on the floor. So again, we're just going to test fit our face frame here, and then we are actually going to take our 1/8 inch spacer block and just gonna make sure that we can line things up properly. So down here, I want this to stick over about 1/8 of an inch, because this is where the next cabinet's gonna butt up against. I don't know if you've ever seen a cabinet, but they typically have a little bit of a hangover. I haven't had a hangover in many years. Gave that up a long time ago. I like to use condiment bottles to fill my glue because you can label them. I have this one labeled. And then get yourself some Tony glue, and then all you gotta do is just fill up the condiment bottle as needed, and it's just really easy to oh Jesus, oh no, Wayne, he's just joking. Yeah. Oh my god, dude, these freaking millennials, man. I tell you what. Yeah, no, I knew you're joking. Yeah. All right, buddy. I am going to use a 18 gauge brad nailer. That's the Airstrike from where is it? From Ryobi. Yeah. I know all you purists out there, you know, stop it. The tool doesn't really matter. I mean, you just use the tool that you have, man, okay? If you can't afford amazingly awesome tools, then just use what you got, man. There's no shame. So we're just setting the frame. We've got our glue on. We are using our spacer block to make sure all of our spacing is correct. Banking on the fact that our box has stayed true up to this point, because if not, then I am fucked. But, it should be okay. Just wiping up some of the glue and... Dude, don't objectify me. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna finish wiping off any of this excess glue, and then just enjoy how smooth. I mean, it feels so good. I mean, all right, dude. No, yeah, for real. Now I need to fill the holes left over from the brad nails, and what I like to use is plastic wood from DAP. Now I like this stuff because it's alcohol based, and it actually dries super quick. So you put it in your holes, you let it dry for even just a few minutes, and then you can go ahead and sand right away. Now for this kitchen job, I am using the Bloom undermount drawer slides. These things are not cheap, but they are very nice. They glide very smoothly, and they're pretty easy to install. One thing that you do have to make sure of is that you are placing them in the right spot. So you want to offset them back from your face frame just a little bit. You can see about 1/8 of an inch there, but then that does leave a gap in the back that we will have to remedy. So we need to fill that space in the back so that we can actually mount the bracket to it. Then another very important part to installing these is you can see that there's a gap, and you want to make sure that gap is equal, because if it's off even just a little bit, then your drawers are not going to actually close properly. And because I don't know how to build a cabinet, both sides are going to have different spaces in this instance. I don't know if that's normal or not, but we do need to make sure that our spacing is correct from front to back so that they're straight. Now you could just take a tape measure and measure it from front to back, make sure you got your right spacing, but I have an easier way. So I'm going to use these spacer blocks yet again and just add blocks until I have the correct spacing. So I just do this by setting it up in the front first, making sure that the drawer slide is nice and flush, and then we can go ahead and take that and slide it towards the back, and now we know that the back gap will be exactly the same as the front gap. Pretty freaking sweet, huh? Yeah, dude. Cool. Okay, yeah. Okay, settle down. So we're gonna take our spacing blocks and make sure that we are nice and flush against the front there. And then we're gonna put this in the back, just like this. And then, no, we got a problem because the bracket is too wide. Damn it. So I've gone ahead and traced where we need to thin down that bracket just a little bit, and take the cutoff wheel and just make it thinner. Then of course, every time you cut metal, you'll always want to check to make sure to see if it's hot, because chances are it's going to be hot. And then I'm struggling here a little bit, knowing that I'm probably going to crush that part of the bracket. So I am just gonna... Damn it! Oh my god, dude, you're an idiot. I literally just got done telling you that when you cut metal, it's gonna be hot. What a moron. So we go ahead and cut the second bracket as well, because we need one for the bottom and one for the top. Go ahead and use the file and get all the sharp edges off, and then we are going to test fit and make sure that we have cut enough off of the bracket. Now this isn't going to compromise the integrity of the bracket at all. It's just a little trim, so don't worry. And now we take our spacing blocks and test fit. And look at that. We cut just enough off. The next step is that I need to mark the back side. And yes, I know the level's upside down. It was easier to see the bubble, okay? But we're going to go ahead and make a mark on the back side. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And this is just going to let me know how big I need to make those upper blocks. So we're going to get a quick measurement on both sides, and now I can start making the blocks for the brackets. So I've determined that 2 pieces of 1/2 inch plywood and 1 piece of 1/4 inch plywood is going to give me the correct depth for the blocks. And these blocks really don't need to be that precise, because in the end, you're really not going to see them anyway. Now I'm just going to use some super glue and some activator to put these blocks together. And why the hell are these things so hard to squeeze? And maybe I'm just weak, but I'm just going to use the super glue and activator because I need to get this done quickly so that I can continue on with the build today. So now we have 4 blocks. Hooray! Now I can use the blocks to fill the space between the bracket and the cabinet, making sure my offset is correct. But there's one more thing that I do need to consider. Since the slide sits on top of the frame, I need to provide the same height in the back as the front. Because if I don't, then the slide wouldn't be level and would want to close the drawer by itself. So I find the right spacing block and I raise the back of the slide. I do a quick check for level and realize that I put the spacer under the bracket instead of the slide. I check for level again and we're good to go. Now I can permanently install the blocks, and I'm just going to use super glue with activator again because it sets up in seconds and I don't have to wait around all day for glue to dry. Now you can use regular wood glue if you wanted to, but I really just want to get these slides installed today. I do want to put a few screws in to hold these blocks since I don't actually know how much weight will be in the drawers, and I am using a countersink drill bit for a cleaner install, and I'm just going to use some 1.5" screws. I'm going to put 2 screws in both of the top blocks and just 1 screw in each of the bottom. Installing the screws is easy enough as long as you have the right bit, which I don't. So I'm going to go grab the right bit and make sure that it fits my screw, and yet again, it doesn't. So I'm going to try one more time, and now we're finally there. Congrats, dummy, you did it! Hooray! Now I can screw in the screws because, well, that's what screws do. And we barely got through that one. Finally, with my bracket blocks installed, I can install the drawer slides using the spacers on the side and the bottom, making sure one more time that we are, in fact, level. I can now drill my mounting holes using this self-centering drill bit. It works by a spring-loaded collar that centers the hole all by itself, which I'm assuming that's why they call it a self-centering drill bit, and not because of its ego. Now you'll see that most of the time when I install screws, I'm using a handheld screwdriver. And that's because you're just not going to strip out the screw if you use a handheld. So that's why I do that. If you still aren't sure how far back you should mount your slide, well, this is what I mean by an 1/8 inch back. You don't want the slide to be flush to the frame face, because then your drawer face will stick out too far. But you can also see that the slide has this convenient distinction. You just line up the notch to the back of the frame. I can now install the 2 front screws that keep the slide from flying out when you pull the drawer. Do the exact same process on the other side for that slide. Now I did struggle a little bit installing these top slides, but basically all you want to do is just make sure that it's level. I marked for the bracket where the bracket needs to go, and I'm just gonna put the screws in. I guess it's really not difficult. I'm sure there's a much easier way to do this, but again, I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. But according to this floating thumb, we still got the job done. Now you may be thinking, dude, that doesn't look level. And you'd be right, but my cabinet had been moved and it too was unlevel the exact same way. So, I mean, 2 wrongs make a right, right? No, I'm kidding. I did re-level the cabinet, which made the slides level as well. Next, it was time to build the drawers. And knowing that my top space is 5 inches, I decided I want the drawers to be 4 inches. So now I just need to determine the width. I measured the distance from outside edge to outside edge of the slides, then I added a 1/4 inch, and this will be the inside width of my box. Now the depth of your box will be determined by the size of the slide that you get. So these are 21-inch slides, so that I know my box length is 21 inches. I'm using 1/2 inch birch plywood for my boxes. Now I could have made the boxes out of hard maple, like all the face frames and the drawer faces, but plywood is cheaper and I don't have to worry about dimensioning all the wood by myself. So I ripped my plywood down into 4-inch strips because that will give me a final drawer depth of 3.5 inches in the end. Now I'm setting up a stop block at 21 inches so I can guarantee that all 4 pieces are exactly the same size. Now, in my case, for this particular drawer, I need 4 24-inch pieces, but this will change based on the drawer size. These drawers are going to have a 1/4-inch floating panel, which means I need a 1/4-inch groove, or dado, along the length of each side. So I'm going to use my Feroid dado stack to get my 1/4-inch groove. Now the reason I'm using the dado blade is because, well, my regular blade is thin curved and I just don't see the need to run each piece through the table saw more than once. I'm going to use my 1/4-inch spacer block to set the correct height. Now these are the clips for the undermount drawer slides. These are what attach to the drawer and clip into the slides. These are exactly 1/2 inch. So I need to set my fence a 1/2 inch from the blade so that the clips have the proper space for mounting to the drawer and have the correct clearance from the floating panel. I'm going to use my micro jig ripper to send these pieces through the table saw because it's just safer anytime your hand is far from the blade. And now that I have my grooves, I need to cut a rabbet. So I'm gonna set up the dado stack to be a 1/2 inch. I need the rabbet to be the width of the 1/2 inch plywood, which 1/2 inch plywood isn't really 1/2 inch plywood exactly. And I'm setting the height at a 1/4 inch. Now because plywood isn't exactly a 1/2 inch, but I set my dado at a 1/2 inch, I need a sacrificial fence so that I can line up my rabbet perfectly without the worry or the danger of my blade destroying my regular fence. Now I can safely push the fence up against the blade so I can fine tune the fence in order to be as precise as possible with my rabbet. Now this cut is pretty important for how your box is going to turn out. And if you've set your fence up just right, your rabbet should come together just like this. With my fence set up properly, all I have to do now is cut a rabbet on both ends of only the 2 side pieces and not the front or the back pieces. Do one more fitment check and it looks great. And as I've said before, I always do test fits before I make things concrete. Or I guess in this case, wood glue. But I want to make sure that I've actually cut the drawers to the right size. So I'm going to take it over to the cabinet and just make sure that I got all my dimensions correct. And would you look at that? Good job, buddy. After verifying that the drawer is right, it's time to cut it all up and start all over again. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to cut the bottom off of the back side, and you'll see why in just a bit. Time to protect my baby hands with my millennial mittens and get to sanding. Now this won't be my final sand, so I'm just sanding everything with 100 grit to knock off any sharp edges and splinters, because if I get a splinter in my finger, I'm shutting down the business and organizing a strike for unsafe work environments. Using my favorite corner clamps and some glue and some brad nails, I'm actually able to put this drawer together in about 10 seconds, so how about that? If you notice anything wrong here, comment below what it is. Now the reason why I cut that piece off the back side of the drawer is so that I can slide the bottom panel in and out for easier sanding and finishing later on. Now I'd like to say, this is not my idea. I actually saw it from Jason with Bourbon Moth Woodworking. I can now cut the bottom of the panel to its final size so that I can slide it down into place in the drawer. With that bottom edge cut off, the panel is super easy to remove and install. And like I said, this makes sanding and finishing so much easier. And you should totally build your drawers this way. And then you know what? You can thank Jason and I later. You might be thinking, how the hell is that bottom gonna stay in the drawer? You just went and cut off the back panel, you idiot. Well, you take that same countersink bit from earlier and you just put 3 1-inch wood screws in the back panel. And then just like that, you can sleep soundly at night, knowing your drawer is perfectly safe. Remember those clippy things that we set up for earlier? Well, these is thems. And all you have to do to install them is, well, screw them into the drawer. Yeah. But before the drawer can go to its home, I need to drill some holes in the back for some tabs. And these tabs are what give the ability to adjust the fitment of the box to the slides themselves. Now the easiest way to mark for these holes is to just set your drawer in place and give it a good whack in both corners. Then I'm going to use the old tape trick to set the depth of my bit, because you do not want to drill through the drawer. You just want to drill enough so that the tab can fit. So this is the quick and dirty way to set your depth, and then just be careful not to push too hard when you're drilling, or you're gonna have a bad afternoon. Finally, we can install the drawer. Set the slides into the clips. We give it a little push, and crap. It's not supposed to do that. If it's set up properly, the drawers should just slide in with very little effort. So you can see here, I'm trying to determine, is it my box? Put it on the bottom. See, that's how it's supposed to slide, nice and pretty, just like that. It doesn't always go to plan. So, what the hell's going on? I'm gonna spend some time trying to figure out, did I install the slides wrong? Nope, everything checks out as level. My spacing is correct. So sometimes it just works this way, and you gotta do some troubleshooting, and we'll figure it out by the end. Day 3 begins with designing the bottom drawer. This will hold 2 trash cans and have a section for other storage. It needs some sort of bottom and probably some sides. Now today was a rough day. I want you to see if you can spot the major red flag yet, because at this point I had zero awareness. I cut out the bottom panel in complete blissful ignorance. And if you still don't see the problem, well, I have just committed a major risk to my safety. With my bottom panel cut to size, I test fit it on the slides to make sure that I have the right clearances, and now I need to determine which orientation to have the cans in. Do I want them to go front to back to each other, or do I want them to go side by side? I ended up going with front to back, so I can have easier access to the storage that's going to be on the side. And again, I have now made my third very dangerous cut on the table saw. At this point, I'm wondering if we should tell this guy what he's doing wrong, or if we should just let him continue to use his tool improperly on cut 4, now cut 5. How many cuts are we going to be able to make before our mistake becomes glaringly clear? Apparently, we can make cut number 6 and lucky cut number 7 until we have the inevitable kickback.
It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
Yep, that's me.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I cannot believe I did that shit. I mean, look at how it just absolutely destroyed this panel. Safety is the most important component to any shop. And when you're tired or just working too fast, you can make a major mistake on something that is so fundamental that it's hard to actually believe. So how the hell could I let this happen? Well, I was working too fast the day before and forgot to install the riving knife after using my dado stack. After taking a break to ice my entire stomach, it was time to get back to work because, well, this cabinet won't build itself and I'm a masculine millennial, so we just keep going. Now I'm trying to figure out how I want to secure these cans in the drawer. At first I thought maybe some type of lock block under the handles of the cans, but that looked ugly. So in the end, I decide I'm going to cut a dado to add a middle panel that will keep the cans in place where I want them. I've set my dado stack to 1/4 inch, and now I'm using some scrap pieces to dial in the groove for a proper fit. But as you can see, the first attempt is just too loose. So it's back to adjusting the thickness of my groove, and I know you're thinking, why don't you just use a caliper to measure the thickness of the plywood and build your stack accordingly? And yeah, I could do it that way. But my caliper was in the drawer on the other side of my shop, and I didn't want to take the 7 steps to go get it. I'm not lazy, I'm just dumb. Now, the second groove wasn't big enough, so 3rd time's a charm, right? Well, after fiddling with the damn arbor nut, and dropping it more times than I would like to put in this video, I finally think that I have the right size groove. Now it is a little bit tight, but I want the joints to be as tight as possible for two reasons. I want the seam to be as non-existent as possible, and though I will be using glue and nails, I want a super strong friction fit as well. Admittedly, it may have been a little too tight, but it was easily fixable with just some sanding on the edges to give it a little bit of a chamfer. I make sure my blade height is set at 1/4 inch, then I cut the groove in the bottom and the front and back panels. With everything seemingly cut to the correct size and specs, go ahead and do a quick sand on all the panels with just some 100 grit as my first base sand. Now I said seemingly cut to the right size because it was at this point that I began to realize I had just made yet another mistake. I told you today was going to be a rough day, and sometimes you have to be self-aware enough to know that it's just time to walk away and come back the next day. The kickback, the bruised stomach, and ego, walk away. It's not quitting, it's called resetting. I come out the next day ready to face my mistakes. I realized that I had cut a rabbet for the bottom panel when it should have been a dado like the top drawer. But because it's wood and wood can be fixed, I recut the dado properly and I have an idea on how I can save the drawer. Here you can see the mistake that I made. I need the panel to be raised like this instead of being flat like a regular box. And if you remember from the top drawer, we need that space to mount the clips that clip into the slides and have the clips not be visible. But this also means now I need to trim down the other two panels. I am a creature of habit, but I did learn my lesson from yesterday's shenanigans when changing from my dado stack to my regular blade. And this time, I will not make the same mistake of forgetting to install my damn riving knife. I seriously still cannot believe I forgot the riving knife. I safely make the two cuts on both of my panels, and now I can start the assembly of the drawer. In retrospect, I probably could have used less glue here in these joints because I found out it's hard to clean up all that squeeze out, even with a damp rag and a straw. This definitely makes sanding way harder, and the box is also getting some strength from the brad nails, so lesson learned on that one too. I had to assemble this box a little different than the top drawer because since I screwed up cutting a rabbet instead of a dado for the bottom panel, I wasn't able to assemble the three sides and then slide the bottom panel in. So I struggled a little bit to get everything lined up and square, especially with that middle panel that also has to fit perfectly in the groove that I made, being rather tight, made it more difficult than it should have been. But everything worked out in the end, and I'm pretty satisfied with the drawer overall. Now I'm missing the front lip. That lip is what the clips screw into. Without that lip, well, we have no clips. So I'm just gonna cut a piece of plywood and glue it in to attach the clips to. This is where the clips need to be, and you can now clearly see why we need that lip. Lots of lips and clips. To make it easy, I'm just going to use a scrap piece of plywood, and it's already cut to the right length, so I just need to mark it, and then once it's marked, I can take it over to the table saw, and with the riving knife installed, I can rip it to size. And yes, I'm still worried about that damn knife. That shit hurt, man. There's absolutely nothing fancy about installing this lip because in the end, you won't even see it anyway, since it'll be covered by the drawer face, but this will give us something to screw our clips into. So I'm just using wood glue and a pin nailer to hold it in place while the glue dries. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight pin nailer. I believe it's the Banks brand, and it works wonderfully. It can shoot anywhere from 1/4 inch up to 1 inch pin nails, and I think I got it for like 30 bucks. There's still one more thing I need to do. I need to add some more material on either side of the drawer because that's actually how we get the right spacing for the clips to line up with the slides. Now you might think the drawer bottom could separate from the box because it's not sitting in a true groove,
but the panel sits directly on the slides. It literally can't fall out. Plus, everything is glued and nailed anyway. So I'm just using regular wood glue and some painter's tape to hold these filler pieces in place. While the glue dries, I'm going to start on the side storage, and to be honest, I did not think this through, otherwise I would have done this differently. But here we are. So I just cut out a square that fits semi-nicely in the available space, and this will be a small cubby to store some trash bags. I'm using the super glue and activator here to bond these small support pieces to the box for my shelf to land on. The idea is that these little pillars will give a nice level foundation to glue my shelf to, while leaving the bottom open to maximize the storage. Now, I am going to use regular wood glue for the front two supports because I don't want the instant bond. I want to be able to have some working time to make sure that these front supports are perfectly square to the bottom of the box so it just doesn't look like crap. After getting the vertical supports glued, I decide I want to have more support. So I cut down some more pieces to glue in horizontally so that it has more support. Dude, why is this glue so hard to squeeze? Or am I just weak and scrawny? Don't answer that. You can see that I'm using the plywood as a straight edge so that I can push the support pieces up against the straight edge while pressing into the box for it to bond. This makes sure that the horizontal pieces are at the exact same height as all four corners, and my shelf will make contact on all of the supports. I use just regular wood glue to bond the shelf to the supports because, well, I don't need it to bond instantly, and wood glue is significantly cheaper than super glue, and I don't ship money. I cut and sand another piece of plywood to close the little box inside of my bigger box inside of the biggest box. I call that boxception. Then I use 2 small scraps of wood to basically make a stop block on either side, so it takes away all of the small adjusting I would need to do while working against the dry time of the glue and fighting the clamp. Doing it this way just makes things so much easier, and I know that last piece will be perfectly straight and square because I took a few minutes to align my stop blocks perfectly. Now I can do the final install of the clips, and doesn't that look just like that top drawer that I made? Then I take the drawer over and give it a few whacks to drill my holes, but that recording got corrupted, so we are going to move on to undoing the final install of the clips so that I can do a quick sanding of the top to prep it for some beautiful walnut trim because, well, the exposed ends of the plywood just look horrible, and you're a complete psycho if you leave it like that. I also lost the recording of milling this walnut down into these little strips. I've cut these strips to be just slightly wider than the thickness of the plywood and about 1/4 inch tall, so I can sand them flush later. And I could use a trim bit in my router, but if you've ever tried to balance a router perfectly on a 1/2 inch piece of material, then you should know why I opted to go with just sanding it. And again, just using some wood glue and my little pin nailer, I can finish the last piece, then use my flush cut saw for the overhang. And would you look at that? It looks pretty darn good. Now I don't have any walnut colored filler, so I'm just gonna make my own. I've collected some walnut sawdust from a ridiculous amount of sanding, and this silicone bowl is actually just a baby bowl from Walmart. It's super easy to make filler. Just use the sawdust from whatever wood you are using in your project, add some glue, mix it together, and the consistency doesn't really matter that much. I just mix it until I feel that the color is accurate without the color of the glue overpowering it. Then you just fill your holes with it. It's really that simple. The homemade filler dries faster because the sawdust absorbs the moisture quickly, so I can now sand my trim and my drawers with a final 220. At this point, it's time to mill some hardened maple for the drawer faces. To make sure I'm not wasting material, I like to draw out the pieces that I need, making sure to give myself a few extra inches for comfort. I start by cutting down this 8/4 maple into a more manageable size so that I can take it to my 8-inch jointer. Now, when I joint a board, I take very little material off because this gives me the best results. I generally only take a 64th off at a time, but never go over an 1/8 in any pass. I prefer multiple shallow passes for better results, and I use a well-known tip of cross-hatching my material with pencil so I can see exactly when my material is flat, or this will also tell you if one of your blades is going bad if you have a jointer like mine with multiple small blades. In this case, I only needed 3 shallow passes to get a perfectly flat face. And a good habit to get into is checking your fence for square each and every time you use your jointer. Maybe the more expensive heavy-duty jointers don't need this habit, but I have a cheaper quality jointer that gets bumped and moved almost daily in my shop, so I check my fence every time before I joint an edge. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed, but my materials seem to be sticking to the table quite a bit in those first few passes. This can be super dangerous, kind of like leaving out a riving knife. So I use a paste wax that you can get from the big box store and wax both my tabletop and my fence to reduce the friction for safer operation. You just buff on the wax, wait a few minutes for it to haze up, then buff it off, just like Mr. Miyagi. With the tabletop and fence freshly waxed up, you can now see just how much smoother the material glides across, which is so much safer as it's so much easier to control. You should never force material through any type of blade. And with just a few shallow passes, we now have a perfectly flat face and one perfectly flat square edge. Next in the milling process is to use the planer to make our uneven side perfectly parallel to our flat side. The planer uses the bed as its reference, which is why it's critical that you have at least one flat face. Now we have one face perfectly parallel to the other. The last step in the milling process is to use the table saw, and with your jointed edge against the fence as your reference, you square up your final edge. And now I'm ripping this maple into 2-inch strips because my drawer faces will be, well, 2 inches. Now my strips are 2 inches by 1.75 inches, and I'm just marking the center so I can take them to the bandsaw and resaw them in half. Now you could use the table saw, but I don't have enough material for that because I want my final dimensions to be 3/4 by 2 inches. So I run all my material through the planer to get my final 3/4 inch thickness. With my pieces at the final dimensions, it's time to cut some grooves for the shaker style drawer faces. I'm marking everything with an S or an R so I can keep each piece oriented the same way, otherwise my grooves won't match. Since my rails and stiles are 2 inches, I think 3/4 inch tenon will work. So I'm setting my blade at 3/4 to cut a 1/4 inch wide groove in each piece. Now the reason I wrote those S's and R's are because I know I can't get my groove 100% perfectly centered. So with the markings on each piece, I can keep track of each piece's orientation during the entire process. I'm making sure that for every piece I run through the saw, that my marking is facing out, away from my fence. You can also face them towards the fence, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you face all of them in the same direction. Otherwise, your grooves will be slightly off from one another. For the tenons, I stacked my dado at 3/4 inch because our grooves are 3/4 inch deep. And I want to dial my miter gauge until my 3/4 inch spacer block is completely flush to the end of my material. I also want to slowly raise my blade until it just barely removes the material up to where the groove starts. So I need to shift my gauge over slightly and raise my blade slightly. With another quick check, you can see that I'm perfectly flush at the end, but still need to raise my blade. One more pass, and now I'm at the point to where I don't really want to remove any more material with my blade. Now I can make the cut on the other side, do a quick little check, and then I'm going to cut all of my pieces for that side before I flip it over and cut the other side. Now with the tenons all cut on one side of each piece, the next step is rather important. The orientation on how you cut the other side of the tenon will determine if you have a really bad time or a less bad time. You want to make sure that you orient your tenon like this up against your stop block, because you'll notice that once you cut this side of your tenon, and then you rotate it to cut the other side, your already cut tenon will land perfectly on your stop block, kinda just like this. When you cut the other side of the tenon, make sure that you lower your blade and slowly raise it up until it just barely takes the material off up to the groove. You don't want to keep the same blade height as before, because like I said, chances are your groove is not perfectly centered. So when you flip all of your pieces over to cut the rest of the tenon out, you'll end up taking way too much material off and have to start all over again. Now, I know this is too tight, but I like to make my final fitment with my chisel and slowly carve the rest of the material away so that I can control the friction fit. Now that I'm happy with how the fitment is turning out, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut out the rest of the tenons on the remaining pieces. With all my stiles grooved and all my rails tenoned, I will do my fitment check to make sure everything will at least begin to go together. Then I will take my chisel and spend however much time it takes to finally tune my joints to how I want them. Now that my tenons have all lost a little bit of chunk due to my invasive poking and prodding, I do another fitment check to confirm my satisfaction, and then I do a little bit of sanding. You should be able to see that once the panels are installed, it's going to be a bit difficult to sand the inside of these edges. So before I move on to the panels, I'm going to hit all of these edges with some 220 grit paper. For the panel inserts, I've chosen to go with MDF. And you might be thinking, dude, why the hell are you using MDF when your frames are all made from hard maple? And the answer is, well, because I fucking want to. That should be enough of an answer, but I will explain further that these cabinets will be painted so you'll never know the difference. MDF is very stable and it's cheap. So get off me. So all I've done is cut the panels to the dimensions of the grooves for each drawer face. Then I'm cutting a 3/4 inch rabbet with my blade height at 1/4 inch, which matches the grooves in the frame so everything plays nicely with each other. And again, I'm using a sacrificial fence because you want to use one anytime you are doing a rabbet, since a rabbet literally means you are cutting part of the material off at the very edge of any given piece. Once I finish with all the rabbets, I can finally assemble the drawer faces permanently. But before I do that, you should already know by now if you've made it this far. And if you have, thank you. Sincerely from my heart. This is hard, man. Making content is extremely difficult with zero experience. But I'm going to do my final fitment check and everything is looking rather great. So it's time to glue it all together. Just kidding, I forgot I still need to do a final fitment check on the other drawer face. And I also need to check and make sure everything is square, because if it's not, then I need to adjust the panels. But I like to check square by measuring corner to corner, mainly because I trust that method more than I trust my squares. Once I know that everything is square, I can go ahead and glue all the pieces together. Now, because I finally tuned my friction fit with my chisel, I really don't need a lot of glue to hold these together. They pretty much hold themselves together with friction, but I do like to use a little bit of glue just for some extra insurance. After all, glue is stronger. After the glue sets up a bit, I'm going to grab my router with a 1/16 inch roundover bit and just give the outside edges a nice little profile. I like the look of the sharper lines for the shaker style drawers, so I don't want to round the edges a lot. I just want to knock off the super sharp edge. I'm going to do the same 1/16 inch roundover on the top drawer face as well. Then with both faces done, I can sit back and genuinely be proud of what I've made so far. I honestly didn't think that it was actually going to turn out this nice. Now I'm just going to hand sand all the sharp inside edges and do a quick sanding along all the sides just to feather everything out. Now I have to figure out how the hell to install these faces to the drawer boxes. I know I want the face to be 1 inch from the top of the frame and 1/4 inch from the edge. So I'm going to use this double-sided carpet tape to temporarily hold it in place until I can drill some holes and screw the drawer face to the box. Now you are going to see me struggle here a bit, trying to get the face level and stay in place sturdy enough for me to even get some screws installed. And I know they make clamps specifically for this application, and I actually do have those clamps, but my boxes are too wide and the clamps hit the sides of the cabinet frame, preventing me from being able to close the drawer fully to line everything up. The tape is really cool because, as you can see here, I didn't have it lined up properly, but I was able to easily pull the face off and reset it to the right spot. I'm finally somewhat happy with the placement, and the slides do let you adjust this slightly later on. So I go ahead and drill 2 holes equally spaced and install some fat head cabinet screws. These 2 screws won't be the only fasteners holding the faces on. The drawer handles have not been picked out yet, but once those are installed, they also will hold the faces on, and that will be enough. I do the exact same process on the bottom drawer face. The only difference is that I did end up putting 5 screws into the face because this drawer did end up being pretty damn heavy, as you can expect. And since it will be used frequently, I want to make sure that it doesn't get yanked off the damn drawer. Alright, so this is the final product. It turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Obviously, it tested me a little bit. It tested my stomach strength and my mental strength, but we got through it. I did fix the drawer issue, so now the top drawer slides really nicely. All that I needed to do was to adjust these tabs in the back, and it's good to go. Same thing with the bottom drawer. It's a little front heavy, but once it's installed, that's not going to make a difference. Nice, smooth close. It's also soft close. I don't know if I ever said that or not, but soft close as well. So let me go ahead and show you the final product of the bottom drawer now. So the bottom drawer turned out pretty good. It holds our 2 cans perfectly here. We've got a little cubby to hold some knickknacks or paddywhacks or even a dog's bone, but it's probably going to be used for trash bags. And then this little cubby right here, you can store a dustpan or something that will physically fit in that spot. Guess you could put a toaster there if it would fit. But overall, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I just hope that it installs okay. Now, if you made it all the way to this point in the video, thank you very much. I said it in the video, this shit is hard. Making content is hard, but I appreciate sticking around and watching it. If you did like it, put a thumbs up on it, please. If you have some constructive criticism and not just hate towards me, is very welcome. Let me know in the comments what I can do to improve the videos. Aside from a better camera and a better microphone, I understand that. I'm working on that part. I'm talking about the flow of the video and the way it's constructed. Other than that, thank you so much, guys. I will have another video coming up. Next is going to be a kitchen cabinet, sink. There we go. That's the word. Kitchen sink cabinet. And it's going to be a barnyard. Is it a barn style sink? One of those big ass deep sinks. So it's not a standard drop-in sink. So that one's going to be interesting as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. And have a good day, man.